Welcome, everybody. We're just kind of doing a seating period here, so feel free to make yourselves comfortable. We're going to wait for a few other folks to join the webinar while we sit here and stare at our cameras and try not to be embarrassed. All right, we'll give this one more minute, let a couple more people come in, and then we will get started. All right, well, let's get this thing rolling. We may still have some folks coming in, but welcome everybody. My name is Jake. I work for Energy Circle along with Peter Trost. We've been doing quite a few webinars this year, obviously. So, and I'm sure you guys have all joined a ton of Zoom meetings and Zoom webinars. But today we're here with Efficiency Vermont to talk about the fundamentals of digital marketing, choosing the right strategy for your company. I know there's been a lot going on as far as how you run your business and how you market your business this year. And trust us, we've been kind of deep in the thick of it and thinking a lot about it. So I'm just going to throw this off to Brian and let Brian give his little intro and whatever he needs to say. And then we'll get started on our presentation.
Great. Thanks, Jake. Yeah, I just want to say, for those of you that don't know me, my name's Brian Sweeney. I'm an account manager for Efficiency Vermont, working mainly with supply chain partners, so contractors, distributors, manufacturers reps, some engineers and architects. So, I just wanted to say thanks for coming. Thanks for taking the time. I know it's people are kind of like zoomed out these days, but this is a really important discussion to be had. Peter and I before this were talking about kind of like preparing for the future, right? These things we do now really prepare us well for times that may be a little bit rougher. It's like going to the gym. You got to get the reps in every day. You got to put the time in now so that when it's game day, right? When you're in a jam, when you need those muscles, they're there, trained, ready for you. I think marketing is a big piece of that for our businesses as well. So, as I think I'm looking at the attendee list, I recognize some names and some are new to me. So I'll just say, if you are already an EEN, Efficiency Excellence Network member, which I definitely see at least one. Hey, Hillary, new member. Nice. Thanks for coming. We're trying to, at Efficiency Vermont, we're trying to bring you contractors a little bit more than just our normal, energy efficiency, expertise, rebates, programs. We really want to be a partner in your business, and we want to help you find opportunities to improve, grow your business, tighten your skills. This marketing training is one example of that. Some other things that you have access to are co-op advertising dollars. So if you're going to be doing any advertising, you have access to some funds there. We would love to support advertising related to energy efficient equipment or services. Reach out if you need to know how to do that. Another pitch real quick, as EEN members, you get a listing on our website. Please take the time to update the bio, put pictures in, tell about yourselves a little bit. We definitely see from a web analytics standpoint that people that have an updated bio and pictures get more clicks, which, in the world of the internet, you hope that clicks lead to leads. We don't have a great way to prove that on our website, but I think at least we know that people are looking at your business more than others if you have that updated. So take that time. And I'm not exactly sure what Peter will get into, but when you look at it from an SEO standpoint too, like, you know, being partnered with trusted websites and providing backlinks between those things is a great free way to boost your SEO score and bring you up higher on the Google page or whatever browser you might use. Which if you're using anything other than Google, just don't bother. Let's be honest, right? Throw Bing away. Anyway, you know, those things are just a couple examples of how we want to help support you. That, as well as some other kind of like free stuff that we offer. We're always looking to do partner highlights. So if anybody has, you know, either a cool project or a business that you'd like to just be able to promote, we have a newsletter that goes out to hundreds of people, and we do a quarterly highlight there. So if anybody would like to be a participant in that, please let us know. We have a queue of people there, so it might be a little while, but get your name on the list now. So I'll shut up and let the real training happen. But again, I just want to say thank you to everyone on the call for taking the time to be here, and thanks to Energy Circle for doing this. You guys are great partners. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. And if there's anybody on the call that is not currently in the Efficiency Excellence Network, please reach out. Brian Sweeney, bsweeney@veic.org, and my cell is 802-825-2697. Call, text, email. You can find me. I can't get away from you. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Awesome. And so before I throw this over to PT, if you have any questions at any time, there is a Q&A tab kind of at the bottom here. So feel free to ask them, and I'll interrupt PT at a relevant time to get your questions answered. So take it away, PT.
Great. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks, Brian, very much for the intro and for having me. Good afternoon, everybody. Brian, I definitely am planning to talk about the directory. I'm not sure if you all in Vermont realize just how unique that product is. There's nothing else like it anywhere else in the country. And and what Brian said in terms of its kind of strength as a lead driving tool, it really is it is pretty powerful. So I'll touch on that. Let me just do a quick sort of intro to me. First of all, you know, if we're not connected somehow or you want to reach out to me about anything following today, I'm pretty easily found on social media, peter@energycircle.com. For email, I do serve on the board of the Building Performance Association, which is kind of my main pro bono contribution to the industry at the moment. And then we do a webinar series every week on Wednesdays for a half an hour, you know, more micro topics than we'll talk about today. So those are free and typically have BPI CEUs. So feel free to chime in. Most importantly, I think in terms of just kind of, you know, for those who don't know me or know Energy Circle, we are a marketing firm that works 100% exclusively with, you know, what we call the better building sector. That, you know, we sort of started in home performance because we're very passionate about it. Our client base includes HVAC, solar, building envelope contractors, auditors, raters, high performance new construction, pretty much any business model you can think of. We probably have a client. We work in every single state and every single climate zone. So, you know, we have a kind of an inside view of what, you know, what's happening across the country, different program statuses and so forth, and a huge data set. Some of the stuff you'll be seeing today comes from 601,000 recorded phone calls into contractor websites. So, and at the end of the day, that, you know, our mission as a company is really to, you know, is to drive more retrofits. As Mike Rogers, my friend, who many of you probably know, used to say, fix more buildings. And our view on how to do that is to drive more retrofits through good contractors. So here's what I want to sort of tackle today. First of all, we can't talk about marketing and not talk about COVID. So, you know, we are living in this unprecedented time. So I want to just start there. We've talked tons about this and I had to boil it down to just a little bit, but I wanted to just touch on a few things. Go from there into sort of some of the core fundamentals of what it means to market in the world of you know, high performance or home performance. businesses, contracting businesses. I then want to just start with some economics, right? So let's just talk about, the age-old question everybody wonders about is, what should I pay for a lead? And most importantly, really, it's not so much, the cost of a lead is very important, but ultimately what matters the most is, what did it take you to fully acquire that customer, take that person all the way through from a lead to a job. So we'll just dive in a little bit to some numbers there. And then what I want to spend most of the time today doing is helping to give you some tools to determine what's the right strategy and particularly right priority for your company, because everybody's got a slightly different challenge, right? And so today's discussion is mostly about, what I'm describing as the marketing foundation. And then next week, a week from today, on the 30th, we'll do a deeper dive into what I would describe as the active lead generation tactics, things like Google Ads and local services ads, which is also another Google product, the use of Facebook advertising, Google My Business, which fits in both categories, but has become a really important driver of leads, and then a bit more about video marketing, which we're finding to be successful. So that's the game plan for this session and next session. And I also just wanted to say, I'll be referencing a few more analytical ways that can support the kinds of things I'm talking about today, real deep dive in. And so one of the things we're offering to anybody as part of this is, between this week and next week, if you'd like us to do essentially what we call a benchmark analysis of your situation, we're doing that at no cost to you guys. So I'll mention it again, but that just as I'm going, just know that offer's kind of out there. Okay, so let me start first with home performance marketing in the time of COVID. And I'll just take a moment here to say, I use the term home performance, and throughout this discussion, I said before, I'm a big believer in it as a business model. What I mean by it basically is anyone who's got an orientation towards a more comprehensive whole house solution, right? And so stay with me on that. We'll talk a little bit more about it. This is a little bit of a complicated chart, but let me just walk you through it quickly. This is from a McKinsey study. So McKinsey is the one organization that I've been able to find that has done statistically valid consumer research on kind of the customer mindset as a result of COVID. And they've done two specific studies. This one was done in kind of late April, and they have another one that they did in the middle of June. But the bottom line is, there's a lot of interesting data in here. But the bottom line is that certain activities that we have learned as a result of this COVID situation are unlikely to change even after we may find a vaccine and life goes back to normal. And so that's what they mean by this sort of upper right box, what they call accelerated shifts. And so my view is that with respect to our industry, and this is really true of everything in home services, the thing that's here to stay is this idea of low-touch services, that either no-touch or low-touch kinds of services is something that is here to stay, and and we've been sort of talking a lot about how to shift our business models to that scenario. We've done a fair amount of work with, and this is with all of our clients across all of the country, in kind of defining the different types of homeowners that have come out of this. And this, we sort of originally published this about 2 months ago, and it has stood the test of time, that there's really sort of three main types of sort of COVID homeowners. One is, come on in, Jim, not too worried about things, no outward signs of concern. One is cautious Christina, so she's respects new protocols, expects over communication, will allow you inside the house, but is going to do so cautiously. And then there's hell no Helen. So nothing, nothing in my house is more important or is important enough to let you into my house. And this has stood the time. And I think that the only thing that's really changing, depending on the region that you're in and so forth, is the proportion of your customer base that falls into each of these buckets. It was interesting. Yesterday I was talking with a couple of our clients, one from Phoenix and one from Westchester, New York, and things had flip-flopped, right? Westchester was originally the the sort of hotbed, and it was a, and their area was full of hell no Helens, whereas Arizona at the time was, everybody was come on in, and then now there's been a certain flip-flopping of that. So the key point is that regardless of regardless of which customer bucket we're talking about, having a buttoned up policy and being on your game and showing that you have good procedures and good protocols and good policies is not going to offend anybody on this list. It's definitely going to address the cautious Christinas. Come on in, Jim is not in any way going to be offended by it. And your only chance of ever getting through to hell no Helen is to be really buttoned up. So that's, this has kind of stood the test of time. We'll get into this a little bit more today, but I wanted to just sort of share sort of some big picture changes that have happened in marketing and lead generation generally as a result of this. And the bottom line, if you look at the column on tactics, is that a great many things that many of us have relied upon as as key sources of our opportunities and leads are in-person things, right? They're events, they're open houses, they're getting out in the community and speaking, they're tabling. Not many folks, I think, in Vermont use door-to-door marketing, but that's certainly a big thing, especially in solar in big parts of the country. Most of those things are off the table, right? And so that has sort of created a ripple effect into the overall marketing environment that is pretty important to the discussion we have today. So along with far fewer opportunities for face-to-face relationship and trust building, what has happened is that all of the leads that may, just collectively across an entire industry that may have come from those buckets, people are trying to replace, and very often trying to replace them with digital things like we're talking about today. So one of the impacts of that is that there's more competition in digital, and it means that each of us has to be better at it, right? And so that's it. Your presence online, which we'll talk about today, certainly elevates in importance. More and more people are defining their sort of building their definition of you on that basis. Referrals, I think, are even more important, and this may be the time to develop a more active referral program. In other words, a paid referral program. We're doing, Brian said this at the outset, here we are at another Zoom call. Well, there's a lot more of this going on in the world, and there's some fatigue about it. So it's challenging. I said this, door-to-door events kind of dead for the moment. We are doing things that we normally did at the kitchen table, first visits, quotes, et cetera, are now getting done digitally. And so Zoom is your new friend. But all of this, I think, puts an increasing burden on the strength of your company reputation. We can call it brand, but the reputation that your company has takes on even more importance, because the way in which people are making decisions about us as companies is now changed quite a bit. I wanted to finally, just on this COVID section, just share a little bit from our data set, because we did a big data dump yesterday, and one of the things we can do, so we manage hundreds of thousands of dollars of monthly spend in Google ads, and that is an insight in what's up and what's down in that data set is an insight into what's going on. And I just want to share a little bit of this. I've kind of merged HVAC and home performance here. Obviously, it's the heart of summer, so in traditional air conditioning markets, the volume kind of continues to be strong, but there clearly is slowing in those parts of the country like Arizona and Texas and Florida, which are the new hotspots. And there's clearly a direct correlation between sort of concern in those areas. Some interesting things with respect to ventilation. And so, I'm highly hopeful that all of the press that we're getting about ventilation, the importance of ventilation, the importance of fresh air, being driven to some extent by the discussions about reopening schools. I am making a bet that this is going to come our way. And I think there's a real opportunity. One little indicator in some parts of the country, not really that appropriate in Vermont or the Northeast, but whole house fans in dry climates are kind of a big deal. house fans in California have just exploded, right? And so exploded way beyond anything we've ever seen historically based on weather. So the speculation here is that people realize that a whole house fan basically, in a nanosecond sucks in the, does an entire air change of your entire house super quickly. Is this a recognition that the ventilation value? So I think there's some, bets there. Most companies that got shut down, entirely, sort of more envelope-oriented companies, have had really strong comebacks, and heat pumps are remaining very, very strong. We are actively and very carefully watching this whole world of healthy home and IAQ. The quick, and dirty here is that our age-old challenge, which is that most people who think about healthy home immediately leap to some kind of air purification device. The search volume for purification is off the charts and continues to be, and there's massive confusion about different technologies and whether UV works and whether this and that. So it's a soup at the moment, and I think is going to continue to be there. But I am hopeful of the kind of transition to ventilation as more important. And consequently, there's a lot more volume and competition in the in that space. In solar and storage, some weakening in the hotspots, and they tend to be pretty well aligned with the big solar states. So that's definitely happening. But we're seeing the storage and battery category is up, and especially in California and Texas and places that we think may be preparing for kind of the hurricane and or fire seasons. And then lastly, the high performance new construction market just seems to be in rock and roll mode. I think this is partially, people moving out of cities and what's going on, but our clients in that category are really having, a lot of success. So I know that's a lot that's fast, but I wanted to at least kind of, start with that discussion and share some of that. So shifting gears and now coming back to kind of normal world, what does it mean to kind of market home performance? There's sort of a fundamental truth to home performance marketing, and that is that the trigger point that enters someone into our universe is almost never, give me some of that whole house home performance, right? People don't understand house as a system. People don't understand the whole house concept. And so more often than not, it is some particular trigger that gets them to give us a call, right? It is, I heard, Efficiency Vermont has some great rebates. It's, I'm suddenly worried about this virus, and I'm now, have some attention to, the issues about fresh air. It could be, I hear spray foam super cool. My crawl space is nasty and gross. My furnace is, or my air conditioning is broken. I've never had air conditioning in my life, and suddenly, it's not just a week in the summer in Vermont anymore. It's, it's intolerable for a lot longer than that, and I want one of those heat pumps. So in other words, a single measure is what brings people into us, and then whether we're successful at converting that single measure into a larger, more comprehensive, more effective whole house type of job is entirely kind of on us. So people not a lot of demand, right? So that's the key question. Not a lot of demand specifically for home performance in its holistic sense, but lots of demand for components parts. And that's the path that gets you towards more comprehensive jobs. So the homeowner's concerns start with a single trigger, and then successful contractors pivot the homeowner mindset to system thinking and high impact whole house jobs. And of course, we could spend a lot of time talking about each one of these triggers and whether they are good triggers or not good triggers. Many of us know that, the best example here is windows. People who, who come through the door wanting new windows, and we want to kind of grab them by the lapels and say, wait a second, maybe windows aren't the most important thing to do first. It's very difficult to get people on a path towards windows to get off that path, right? So, whereas, there's all kinds of other things, people very interested in spray foam might easily be just talked to about the value of different types of insulation materials and so forth. So at the end of the day, though, I want to leave this beginning part with one sort of key point, which is the first touch. What the nature of the experience is when you first communicate with that person is incredibly critical. And you start with the idea that most leads are single measure. You are selling something different, and that experience has to be better right from the start. And what's happening is that the means by which homeowners are contacting us as contractors is evolving. I mean, it used to be basically, it was one of two things, right? It was either the completion of a form on the website or it was a telephone call. Many folks now have added live chat to that big three mix, but there's all kinds of other ways. Messaging from Google, messaging from Facebook Messenger. There's a quote request in Google. We'll touch on this a little bit. You may get a bid request from some, aggregator. You may get a text message. I mean, there's all kinds of this that's changing. The most important thing, I think, from the data that we've collected on this is that regardless of what the means by which they contact you, the trend is that people want instant answers, right? And so what we have seen is over the years is a steady decline in the people of using forms in favor of instant gratification via the telephone or chat. So in 2019, it was 78% of leads were either phone or chat, and 22% were people completing a form. And so, again, with that phone ringing, just be thinking about how good the quality of the experience is on that first, that first touch, whoever it is in your organization that's taking that first call and having that initial piece. Okay, so let's dive into this whole question of like, what should you be paying for a lead? And many of you have heard this great famous quote, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half, attributed to John Wanamaker, a Philadelphia retailer. It's the right question. And everyone on this call has probably some different problem with respect to marketing, right? Or a different challenge with respect to marketing. And it's easy for many of us to say, well, we just don't have enough leads, or the leads are no good. But, there's a variety of different things, right? It could be that, you've got enough leads, you're paying too much for them and the economics don't work. It could be that you're getting leads in, but you're not converting them. It could be you've got a kind of diversification problem. You got too many eggs in one basket, right? This is very often the case with solar companies that have relied too much on purchase leads. They got so many eggs in this purchase lead basket. Suddenly, the quality of those gets bad, and you don't have a lot of turn. So how diverse? Is your mix of tactics there to get competitive pressure, right? Are you consistently losing out to a particular competitor or pricing? So I just wanted to, everyone's a little bit different, and is going to have a slightly different nuance to their particular challenge. So just a little bit of math, not too much here, so just stay with me on this. It's an imaginary objective, because I really like to start at the top, at the most important thing here, which is we've got, your company has a revenue goal. In this case, I'm saying $750,000. If your average ticket size is 4,500, that means you've got to do 168 jobs in order to meet your number. And I grant you, these are kind of, big meat axe kind of generic numbers, but stay with me. If your close rate on leads to get to that 168 is 30%, that means you got to have 556 leads. And there is nothing more clarifying in marketing than knowing, this kind of a number. I gotta, over the course of this year, we have to have a program in place to generate 556 leads. Now, if you the next thing to think about is what should you be spending in order to get those, right? And so one way to look at it is to sort of pick a number, which is a pretty typical number in contracting businesses, of about 7% of gross sales as your marketing budget, right? So stay with me on that. I'll revisit whether 7% is valid or not in just a second. But at 7%, which is a pretty industry average, you would have a marketing budget of $52,000, but in order to get your 168 jobs or get your 556 leads, you have a tolerance at 7% to spend $313 on the acquisition, fully all in, or $94 for the lead, assuming you're closing those leads at 30%, right? So, one way to think about that, again, is if you have decided that 7% is an acceptable number, what you're basically saying is, I am willing to give up that much of my margin in order to drive my marketing. And with a number like that in place, you can then say, okay, as long as my cost per acquisition is $313, my cost per lead is 94, or under that, hopefully, then I'm all good, right? And when some particular tactic that you try goes higher than $94 for lead, then you got to start asking yourself whether that is working. Whether 7% is right for you or not for you has a lot to depend on where you stand as a business, right? In HVAC companies that have big customer bases, lots of service contracts, strong brand, maybe they've got a higher percentage of their business in commercial, they can spend a lot less than 7%, down to 2%. Other companies that, we know spend considerably more. They're up in the 12 and 15% range because they have aggressive goals around a new product. They're entering a new market, et cetera. So not dictating 7% here. I'm just saying that a decision on your part as to what your goal is, and then what what percentage you should devote to marketing. And by the way, when I say this, I'm talking just marketing, so not sales cost in this case, just the cost of the advertising that you would do, as well as all personnel expenses that would be relative to marketing. That's what I mean by this number, about 7%. So how we get to lead cost is all about conversion rate, right? And so one way to think about it is, and I'm simplifying a kind of a funnel here, that you get a lead, that the next stage in that, from the lead is a decision to take that to an appointment. The next stage would be go to a quote, and and only at that point do you close the job. And I grant you, some people, there isn't really this separation between an appointment and quote. Some people would say, look, every appointment I go on is going to get a quote. So that may be the case in your case. But look, if you are at 50% in each of these stages, 50% of your leads get to an appointment, are worthy of an appointment, and 50% of your appointments are worthy of a quote, and you close 50%, your total conversion rate is 12.5%. So nowhere near the 30 that we just talked about. To get to 30, you've got to have numbers like these, and these could obviously shift around, but 50% of your leads have got to be good, right? They've got to be good enough to justify an appointment, and 80% of your appointments need to go to quote, and 75% of your quotes need to go to close, right? So this points out the challenges of how, of a 30% conversion rate, which I would imagine when I first put that up, many of you probably said, yeah, we do that, or that seems kind of low. It's not easy when you sort of dissect it. So let's look at a couple examples just to walk through this, because every form of marketing is going to be a little bit different. So I'm using Home Advisor here, not because we're advocates of it for the most part. Home Advisor is not working for the reasons you'll see in this number. But in Home Advisor, you might spend $25 for a lead, non-exclusive, right? So it's getting sold by Home Advisor to at least 2, sometimes 5 other companies. So consequently, because it's non-exclusive, the race to getting that appointment is probably way low. So 15% in this case, this is a real numbers from a real client, by the way, 15% lead to appointment, 50% appointment to quote, and then a 30% quote to close, because Home Advisor leads tend to be very price sensitive. The cost per acquisition in this case ends up being north of $1,000. So what looks like a very inexpensive lead, right, at $25, well below the 90 something that we just talked about, it turns out as you move through the process, at a cost per acquisition, it becomes quite expensive and probably uneconomical if you have made a decision like we just talked about, that you're only willing to give 7% of your margin to your marketing expense. Now you look at something else like Google Ads, it sort of flips on its head, right? In the case of Google Ads, you might spend $120 for the lead. Remember that when you use Google Ads, you're paying Google for the click. And so let's say, it takes you, if the click costs $12 for easy math, it might take 10 clicks to get the one that actually becomes a lead, and that we perform quite a bit better than that, but that would get you a cost per lead of 120. They're better leads because Google Ads have commercial intent. People are clicking on them because they are looking for a service that they want to buy, and so you get a better lead to appointment, you get a better quote ratio, you get a better close ratio, and what looks expensive at the beginning at $120, actually at the end as a cost per acquisition is about $313. So I point this all out just to kind of make that point that first of all, the most important number is the cost per acquisition. That's what really matters as to whether or not your marketing is effective and economically appropriate. But it can have varying degrees of what you would be willing to pay for a lead. I want to talk a little bit about marketing mix. And so this is real data from a client of ours, mostly a building envelope company, actually in Maine, so pretty analogous to a contractor in Vermont. They're about 1.7 million in sales. They're basically a air sealing insulation company, does some carpentry kind of stuff. This is the pie chart of where their leads came from over the course of last year. And it isn't so important to kind of go into the detail on this as much as to just take a quick look at the pie chart and see, the 21, the biggest single contributor was at 21%. Lots and lots of small pieces of pie. A far cry from back in the day when you might have you do some direct mail that would produce kind of half your leads, and maybe you did some other yellow pages kind of thing that was the other half of your leads, right? It requires you to be in a lot more tactics than typical. In their case, the ones remaining in color are the things that are digital in nature. So about 75% in their particular case are in the category of digital. You can look at that two ways, right? One is that 25% of the leads are not digital, and I'm a huge advocate of, first of all, what works, and I think it is important to have more traditional things out there. But as we talked about earlier, especially in the COVID era, a lot of the things that were not digital that were effective were going to fairs and tabling and getting out in the community. Those things that may have been severely compromised, home shows, which are not going to be happening until this is fixed. So digital is a growing performance. Again, this is going to be different for all of you, but that's where that is. Okay, so let's move now to how to determine and then start to prioritize the right digital marketing strategy for you. And I'm dividing things into two sides here, right? One is this idea of a strong foundation, things like your website, your Google My Business, your review, sort of corpus of reviews that are out there, how well you do in local search, content, sort of a subset of the website, but content doesn't only just live on the web, and video is a part of that, and then also digital systems. And then I'm separating that foundation, which I think everybody really should have, from what we would describe as more active lead generation. So things like Google Ads and so forth. And this is really the divide between today's discussion, which is going to be mostly about foundation, and next week's, which is mostly going to be about the stuff on the right, the active lead generation stuff. So I wanted to focus on these main things today: website, Google My Business, search, rankings, digital systems, social presence, reviews, and video. And I just want to say at the outset, and this is just to remake the offer that I did at the beginning, there are many quantitative ways to get at these, the analysis of these things, right? So we are willing to kind of do that in, between now and next week. If any of you are interested, just sort of email me today after we're done, and we can sort of run some reports that will give you some very objective and quantitative approaches to this. But between now and then, I want to just walk through some things that are a little bit more subjective, but any one of you can do to sort of do a self-audit of where you stand with respect to the digital foundation. And the first is website. And the simple question I think to ask yourself is, does your website tell your story well? Right? It's that simple. And to get more detailed about it, does it build trust? Do you have a great About Us page? Enormous amount of traffic goes to the About Us page. Incredibly important that all your services be represented. So if you are, if you're trying to sell something, if you buy what I said earlier, that there's a wave coming of people recognizing the value of fresh air, ventilation. If you don't have, information on your website about ventilation, about HRV, ERV, et cetera, your chances of winning any of that traffic are nil. We live in a very educationally intensive sort of field, right? People, need to be, healthy home needs to be explained. Heat pumps need to be explained. Home performance certainly needs to be explained. So do you have kind of, are your educationally intensive pages detailed enough? And then lastly, how fresh, or conversely, how stale is your content? In other words, when was the last time you did something new on your website? The story of your company, everyone's going to tell this differently, but I just think, it's super important to show your values. I think this is even more important in the era of COVID, because there's really sort of people have new standards about the kinds of companies that they're choosing. There is no more important thing in terms of where the trust is getting built than kind of the feeling that people get when they land on your website. You can obviously lean on third-party trust symbols and associations and memberships to do this. Brian sort of said it earlier, but being an EEN in Efficiency Vermont is a worthy thing that helps people understand that you are separate and distinct from the run-of-the-mill contractors out there. This is what I mean by sort of long form, and it was a little hard to figure out, but these two things represent a long scrolling web page about whole home solutions, right? Is your house making your family sick? And this kind of long form storytelling, when the topic is something as complicated as kind of healthy home, is proven to be a incredibly powerful way to get conversions. You can see it's obviously, there's a lot of design that's gone into it. It's well organized and so forth. But this is what I mean by a kind of educational content that's long form. At the end of the day, the quantitative metric that is most important with respect to your website is conversion rate. If you've got 100 people to visit, how many of those 100 signed up or called as a result of landing on your webpage so that you could actually act on them as a lead? And this is a bunch of our clients from last year, and you can see a pretty broad range of conversion rates. Some as high, closing in on 20%. Others kind of on the lower side. So this is super important, but critical in this case that you have your metrics set up, your analytics set up, so that you can measure this. The next thing I want to talk about, and we'll talk more next week because it really fits in both the foundation as well as in the this sort of active lead generation, is Google My Business. Incredibly important. Just to be clear what we're talking about, you have a profile in Google My Business. You submit a fair amount of information in there about your company. And when somebody searches for your company name, they will get this box on the right-hand side called the Google Business Profile, or the Knowledge Panel, in which there's an enormous amount of information. And so one of the things that's happening is that more and more communication with your company is bypassing your website because of how much information exists on a page like this. It's even more dominant in the case of mobile. Like you can see, like all the search results in this case for Ideal Energy in the example here fall below the Google My Business information. The reason this is so important, and we call this, or the industry calls this, the concept of zero click, meaning they contacted you without ever visiting your website. And this is one example, 3 months of time for one of our clients. 43% of people who were who connected to them via the Google My Business just picked up the telephone at that point and called, right? And so there's an enormous amount of information there, and it's increasingly important. There's a whole lot more to optimizing that. The thing I just wanted to say today is that it is well worth the investment to make sure that your Google My Business is really buttoned up. And next week, we'll talk a little bit more about exactly some of the specific things that means. If you haven't sort of taken ownership of it and sort of gotten access so that you can control it, that is absolutely step one. And then we can talk more about how to use it to optimize. The next thing I want to talk about is search rankings, and in particular, I want to talk about how strongly do you rank throughout your service area. So we're, for the most part, all service area businesses, right? We serve an area, and Google is amazingly biased towards the physical location of our business. So this is an example I'm using of me searching for solar from my office in downtown Portland. And what Google is delivering up, if I just as a, solar, I think the search term here was solar installer, Google gives me the 3 companies that are the closest in proximity to where I am physically searching from, right? It happens to be these are 3 really good companies, but most of the time, proximity to where you're searching from in a service area business is not particularly relevant, right? I'm not searching for a coffee shop that has to be in walking distance. I'm searching for a company that is in my territory that does it. And so this is what we call the 3-pack in the search, and the question of whether you show up in that 3-pack is super important. One of the tools that we now have is a way of assessing how well you rank for a particular search across your geography. So this map is showing basically I think it's an 80-mile square and essentially replicating the search being done by a person in exactly these sort of 9x9 grids, right? And so you get a sense here, like in a particular area down there, this company's number 1 in a little interesting area, but there's a couple of 5s that pick up. So very sort of challenging to kind of rank, but super, super important. In terms of digital systems, so all of us, you hear this term digital transformation a fair amount. All of us are, somewhere along the path of having transformed our business into the digital realm, right? And it's, no one's not done anything, right? So we're using telephones, we're using smartphones, et cetera. I think the question to be asking here is, are your digital systems kind of achieving their full potential and where they need to be? And when it comes to marketing, the real kind of workhorse digitally of a strong marketing program is a customer relationship management software system or CRM. So Salesforce is kind of the big dog in this. There's a whole bunch of other products out there. Many of them are very cost effective. I would just ask you to be thinking about whether or not that your CRM or the means by which you use to kind of track your leads and your opportunities is in good shape, because everything I've talked about up until now depends on having the metrics in order to measure that, right? To know all of that data about how, how many, what the disposition of the leads that you happen to have bought from Home Advisor and how many of those closed is very dependent on having them in some kind of a system like a CRM. And so this can be, many of these are inexpensive and low risks to give a try. I'm not saying CRM is the entirety of kind of your digital world, but it's certainly one. And the other, the other aspects to think about here are, if we are doing business now in a more low touch way, then are your other systems, your choice of whether to use Zoom or use Google Meets or whatever it is, and is the quality of the experience that you have, when you or one of your salespeople is actually having a Zoom call with a homeowner, is it a quality experience? Things have fundamentally changed. Sales has fundamentally changed. It's a lot easier for people to miss or postpone an appointment that's a Zoom call. It's a lot harder to try to close somebody on a job on a Zoom call. So things have kind of fundamentally changed in this digital realm, and it is time to get our act together. Next thing would be social presence, and this is your visibility in social media. So when we talk about online presence, we've talked so far about website, we've talked a little bit about Google My Business. There is the presence of your company throughout social media. And so this is a good time to be thinking about shoring up your presence, and thinking about where in the landscape you need to be. Facebook, in our view, is and is controversial, and frankly, Energy Circle's been participating in the boycott during the month of July because we're not happy with kind of some of the things Facebook is doing. That being said, when I take my ethical hat off and put on my marketing hat, there are not many marketing approaches that have the level of targeting and therefore low expense that Facebook has. And so Facebook and Instagram are pretty unified in this case. Whether LinkedIn matters to you or not is entirely dependent on whether you're, how B2B you might be, how many commercial customers you want. And then again, depending on your sort of business model and whether to the extent to which you're in remodeling or new construction, House or Pinterest or Nextdoor or Twitter may be important. But all of these things are relevant to how people find out about you. Next, I want to talk about reviews. Here's the kind of changes that have happened in the review landscape in 2020. So number one, Google is king. I know Yelp has never been a giant factor in the state of Vermont, but it has been, but in parts of the country where it really was a huge deal, California and Arizona, for example, Google has surpassed. So more and more people, when just given no other choice, are going to choose to write a review, are doing so in Google. The quantity in Google, I'll share what our recommendations are in just a second. Very, very important how many Google reviews you have. In your guys' unique case, this Efficiency Vermont directory is super important, right? It's a fantastic traffic driver. Brian said at the beginning, I'm unaware of any other directory of its kind by an efficiency organization that has reviews in it. And so I think, and what Brian said about the, having a good profile, but also very important having a good review sort of system or review corpus, very important to whether or not you're going to get that click. So uniquely important to all of you. Diversity still does matter, right? And so I'm not saying you can walk away from Facebook or Yelp or whatever else. But the one big thing I want to make a point of here is that the content of your reviews has grown in importance. Here's just here's the Vermont directory, really well done, absolutely the best in class in the country, and certainly worth taking advantage of from your guys' standpoint. Here's our guidance in terms of quantities, and I know for many of you this is probably a little bit on the scary side. It's different depending on your business model, but it's at the end of the day, what matters most is where you stand relative to your competition, right? But generally speaking, across the country, we're saying now that a home performance company needs to have about 40 Google reviews, insulation 30, a builder 30, a remodeler 50. Solar's gotten really, really, really aggressive. So that's kind of where we are. This is the point, I'll have to make it real quickly, just in the interest of time, about review content. Very often, companies that are successful with review quantity, right, they get a lot of them, tend to get very simplistic reviews that are all about the customer experience. Great company, great work from a great company, very professional and responsive, right? Or calling out a particular technician, right? Jim was awesome, wore booties, did a great job, fixed the problem, right? Versus a review that says something about the work, right? If you read this first one, professional organization, the extra insulation they placed in the attic is doing its job, reducing our utility bills. Or the second one, encapsulated our crawl space, house is warmer, crawl space is clean, no condensation. Or mold, moisture, crawl space, attic, moisture and mold problems, historic home. That kind of keyword information in your reviews has become increasingly important. And so big topic to talk more about in terms of how to make reviews happen in that way, but we've got some good tactics that we've learned over time. Video. So just want to say a little bit about this because this video fits incredibly well into the explanatory challenge that we have about so much of what it is that we sell, and people want it, and it is proven to be very effective. So explainer videos, and I think, although Vermont's pretty advanced, by the standards of the rest of the country in terms of people's understanding of heat pumps, there's still mass confusion about it, and and disinformation about whether they work in cold temperatures, et cetera. And so going the extra mile with something like this on your heat pump page, this has boosted the conversion on this page dramatically. Having customer testimonials that are in video form has been really dramatic. And then having basically a YouTube channel, and sort of having some simple means of producing this. Next week, we'll talk quite a bit more about active ways to get YouTube out, and I'll show you, or not YouTube, but get video out there and seen, and I'll show you some real world numbers about it, but that's a big deal. So that's the list, and let me stop there. We've got a few minutes here for questions. As I said, I'm happy to do we would be more than happy to do this kind of a benchmark analysis for you to try to, what I talked about were sort of somewhat quantitative, somewhat subjective, and certainly things you can do, but we've got some tools that we spend a lot of money on to, that do kind of analysis like this. And if you reach out to us, we can get that done over the course of the next week. All right.
Cool. Well, we don't have any questions as of right now. So if you guys have anything, anything specifically related to your business or something that's specific, please let us know. But I know that, like, for us, a really popular question has been like, okay, I only have so much budget right now for some kind of paid advertising. Should I focus on PPC or should I focus on Facebook?
Yeah, and so when Jake says PPC, what he's referring to is pay per click advertising. That would be using Google. I think the thing, and again, we'll get into this next week a little bit more. There is a kind of a bottom limit to or a minimum threshold of spend that you kind of need to make Google effective, right? And I say that with a certain caveat because it's really dependent on your business and what it is you're trying to sell. If you're in the more traditional HVAC world, it's pretty competitive space in Google Ads. You've got to have a kind of enough investment in the market to be able to kind of be out there and be competitive. If you went for something much smaller, it kind of might work. So there's an important distinction though between Google Ads, which are very commercial in intent, right? It's people searching for a service and you showing them the right ad and having a good experience and them clicking through, versus Facebook, which is, something that is well placed and well thought out and has great creative, but it's just going down somebody's, somebody's Facebook stream. It's not an environment in which people are actively looking to buy things. So there's a big distinction there, but also a big price difference. So, again, that's why, my big emphasis today is everybody's problem is a little bit different. And so it's only understanding your specific goals and the specific nature of your situation that you can kind of tailor a specific, plan that's right for you.
Yeah. And then one that I just thought was kind of interesting, actually, this came up yesterday, but the rise in searches for, and in general, like just interest in air purifier.
Mm-hmm.
What about companies that don't necessarily use air purifiers, but perhaps are using more like, using terms like ventilation or filtration? How can you capture the purifier traffic maybe?
Well, I think, I touched a little bit on this, and we've been watching this kind of explosion of air purification on a week in and week out basis ever since the COVID hit. There is massive misunderstanding out there. And as you can imagine, there's also a lot of, there's a lot of people aggressively marketing technologies that may not be particularly effective, right? And so one thing that I think is people schooled in building science, people who understand this stuff, need to better position themselves as the trusted source for this. You would much rather have somebody call you and have you help explain the question of whether or not UV works, or whether or not ozone works, or what about these new things that have HEPA plus something else, et cetera. So I think the key thing to know here is that there is just going to continue to be mass confusion. I think it's going to get worse. I mean, just that there's all kinds of sleazy companies are just entering into this space, and we need to speak the truth. But having attention to that air purification thing, and my hope here, I'm making a certain bet that because of all the attention, and Efficiency Vermont's doing a lot with respect to schools in terms of the ASHRAE standards and the kind of ventilation standards and so forth. I'm making a bet that there is going to be growing awareness of this concept of fresh air. Right? People are starting to get the notion that coronavirus is spreading from tight indoor settings, not from being outdoors. And that should translate really quickly to, look, if we can bring kind of fresh air in and have really good, supply and exhaust within a home, that's the ticket, not, a shiny object that might be kind of the latest purification device.
Yeah, great. So maybe air changes per hour might become a household name finally.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I mean, that's pretty much everything we've got. I think we end webinar now.
Webinar. Great. Well, thanks everybody. Hope it was useful. As I said, reach out if you'd like us to do a little bit more kind of analytical view in your particular situation, because we're happy to do that during this in between week. And other than that, have a great week. Be safe. See you next time at the same BAT channel.
Awesome. All right. See everybody next week. Thank you, Gwen, Hillary, Ken, Marika, Susan, and there were like 3 or 4 other people that left. So thanks for joining, guys.
Great.
Thanks, everybody. See you.